Right, I'm going to get started because I don't think I'm going to get any people joining me from Zoom. But just in case, I'm going to keep it in the corner there. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk from an outline that I've put online. Outline online. And today, what I'm going to talk about is advice for senior stakeholders. Now, this is, I'm going to be absolutely honest here, this is a chapter that I've drawn the outline for in my detailed outline that I'm putting in my book proposal, but haven't actually written the chapter. And this is the first time I've really talked it through. So we'll see how we get on. I'm going to talk for 15 minutes, unless I'm really, really in the flow, and then I'll talk for 20. But what I realise about this chapter is that it's really a recap of all the other chapters where I talk about helpful and useful ways of seeing things, and about some unhelpful and not so useful ways of seeing things. I review all of those things. So we'll see how this goes. I'm putting it on the internet, but I'm not making any particular claims for it. I will have the transcript, and that might be useful for actually writing the chapter. We'll see. Okay, so advice for senior stakeholders. So chapter 1 in this book talks about different kinds of value streams and the importance of understanding the difference between these kinds of value streams. The one value stream that we have in an existing product is we have a value stream that connects everything together that needs to be there for the value. We don't have that value stream in a non-existent product, in a new product. We're constructing that value stream. But we have, in a non-existent product, we have another value stream, which is the idea. And so what's important for senior stakeholders to understand, and very often they don't understand this, and I don't think, why should they? Because nobody's trying to tell them, that it's to understand the difference between an existing product and the kind of methods and structures that work well for managing existing products, and a non-existent product and the kind of methods and structures that work well for managing non-existent products that need to be connected together. And one of the crucial things about that is that there will be a lot of surprises. There will be aspects of putting together things to get value from a new product that will not be expected, and that will undermine very often, this is the other thing, it will very often undermine the original idea, the idea value stream, because there'll be surprises, and some of those surprises might be positive. You might discover extra value, you might discover new ways of using this new product that you've developed, but there'll also be nasty surprises, that it costs more than you thought, that the technology that you thought was going to solve all your problems isn't going to solve all your problems. So this is the most crucial thing, I think, and this is maybe the big idea in the book. Hello. Hang on a minute, let me turn up my volume. Hello, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Aha, hello, how are you doing?
Very well. How are you?
Not so bad, not so bad. I had just started talking, but as often when I do these talks and somebody turns up, I'll start from the beginning again. I'm only
Okay.
going to talk for about a quarter of an hour, if that's okay.
All fine. Are you? Is there anyone else on?
No, it's just you.
Oh,
So,
that's fine. Okay. So, um, I guess. Do you want to tell me why you're doing them in a positive way? Is it
um,
practice? Are you recording them or?
I'm recording them. So I mentioned that, and if you want to, well, there's various ways we can do this. I can stop recording if you're not happy with me recording at all. Um, I can ask you to keep quiet while I talk, and then I can turn it off when you ask questions at the end. Um, I suppose those are the two
That's
main.
all. That's all fine. Yeah, it might be good to have the questions at the end. Yeah, I'm very. I mean, I want to be supportive, and I'm happy to multitask. I'm gonna multitask a little bit when I
Right,
listen to, believe it
that's
or not. So, I'll listen, and yeah, I can. I guess I'm interested in, if you like, how you're developing your body of knowledge and what you're doing to
yeah.
present yourself to the LinkedIn audience. So I guess that's the context of it. I'll
So
mute and listen. So,
Yeah. Okay. So just really briefly about that before I get back to what I was talking about.
yeah.
What I found when I went to the Edinburgh Festival, tried to do a show at the Edinburgh Festival without any preparation at all, which is an interesting experience.
Wow. Right.
And one of the things that I did as a result of that was give talks on the meadows every day while I was there until I got COVID. Um,
Oh, dear.
and I just found talking was a very useful way of exploring the material.
Yeah.
And the result of the result of this is that I'll upload the video to YouTube. I'll get a transcript of the video, and that's kind of text that I can use to develop. So what I was saying was that, um, so I won't put any video on YouTube that has got you in it, Brian, even talking. Um, but what I was saying was, where is it? Um, that this chapter, which is called Advice for Senior Stakeholders,
Yeah.
it's another long story about writing a detailed outline, but I haven't actually got this chapter in the book yet. All I've got is the detailed outline.
Okay.
And this is the first time I've talked about the detailed outline.
Okay.
So, but what I realise this detailed outline for this chapter does is it kind of goes back over the other things that I've been talking about earlier in the book. And so I'm going to do that now. And then at the end I can stop the video and you can ask any questions that you've got. Is that okay?
It is okay. I've done videos on YouTube, on LinkedIn, for the stuff I've done.
Uh-huh.
I'm not in the mood to do it these days, but I might do in a week or two.
Right. So.
So if you like, I'm on a different journey, but I've done something. I haven't done a book. Well done, you've done a book. I mean, amazing. So on the other hand, if you want, I'm fairly happy to be on video.
Right.
Just give me a little warning, including. I might have a question, but I can just plant a question. If you'd like a little bit of to and fro,
yeah,
give me a question. I'll ask you a question, and you can include it in the video. In which case, you've got a little bit of banter going in some sense.
Okay.
So let that be. Yeah, like give that to you. Could be today. If you're doing a few of these, it can be any day. But yeah, I'm up for that.
Let's just talk through it. If you've got any questions, then I'd be interested to hear what they are. And as I said, like I'm going to try and finish. I'm only going to do another quote for now, basically. So
okay, sure. Awesome.
So I'm just going to get back to this outline because I don't know it that well at all. So
okay, I'll go quiet and I'll listen basically. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Good luck.
So basically, this chapter is advice for senior stakeholders, and as I'm saying that, I realise I probably need to do a bit more thinking about who those people are, and kind of put that maybe right at the beginning of this chapter. And really, what this is a recap of the ideas that I talk about in the book, and what the take on them needs to be for kind of senior people who might be attached to a project. And care that a project is a success, or they might be closely associated with a project. They might have got this project funded. It may be important for their business that this project works. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is something that I think is possibly the most important idea in the book, which is to draw attention to the difference between the way that value streams work in products that are complete, in projects that are complete, and the way that they work in projects that aren't complete, with products that aren't complete. And that is that in a project where you're developing a new product, you are actually building and constructing the value stream that will deliver that product. You're putting the values together that need to be together for that product to succeed, and then connecting with an audience, creating pull from people who actually want this product and will get value out of it. And so from a point of view of what's the advice to stakeholders is to understand this difference between creating a new product and the structures that need to happen to manage creating a new product, and managing and manufacturing an existing one. And one of the crucial things that's different about those two things is that there's a lot more surprise when you're generating a new product. There are lots more uncertainty. There's a lot more things that can go wrong. And so the expectation that everything will be smooth and that there won't be any bad news is really a kind of problematic expectation when you're developing new products. The other thing to understand about this business with new products of basically building the new value stream, that what I talk about in the chapter about value streams, is that there's an existing value stream, which is the one that got the idea funded. And that when you start to encounter these problems when you're putting the new value stream together, they undermine the idea. And if you're the person who had the idea and you're the person who got the funding for the idea, this can be extremely difficult. And it's very tempting to try and shut up the people who've encountered the problems, to try and basically silence them with some kind of version of toxic positivity. And I understand that is very difficult, and part of what needs to happen for those people is to understand that if you start to do something new, if you have a new product, you've got funding for it, and you start to do new things, you will end up with problems that need to be tackled in order to actually move forward and have some success in that space. One of the other chapters that I talk about, these are not in the order that the chapters come, which is something I need to fix, there's a chapter called Escape, which is about the importance of working software, the importance of getting products, even if they're not fully functional, even if they only have a small amount of functionality, the importance of getting those into the hands of users, and also kind of like the value in getting things near to the outside world, even if for various regulatory reasons you're not allowed to release this thing until it's fully done and dusted. And the main kind of argument that I'm making for senior stakeholders here is that you should understand that this process of trying to get working software out to users, even if it's a minimum amount of functionality, or getting things as near as possible to users through the various kinds of live and live environments, all of this is a strategy for de-risking the project. It's if you can connect with users, you can get feedback from users about whether this is really what they expected, about whether this is valuable. You can actually discover value that wasn't expected in the initial idea for the project. But also, by getting things near live, even if you're not allowed to actually release them for various reasons, you're de-risking the technical issues. You're finding out whether this technology actually can do the things that you're expecting it to do. You're de-risking the regulatory issues. The nearer you get to a live system, the more likely it is that various kinds of regulators and people who have non-functional requirements of your system are going to come out of the woodwork, rear their head, send an email, make a phone call, and make you aware of various kinds of regulatory issues that you maybe didn't know about. So by trying to get something as near as you can to the outside world and letting it escape, letting it be in contact with real users, again, this might seem like it's undermining the idea. It might seem like it's taking the shine off whatever was the motivation for the project in the first place. But what it's really doing is it's de-risking the product. One of the chapters earlier in the book is called The Swamp, and the point of the chapter about the swamp is basically to make it clear that any organisation in which a project is happening is a complex space with lots and lots of different things going on, lots and lots of different stakeholders. So the example that I give in The Swamp is there are people who live in the swamp, there are people who might want to live in the swamp, there are people who own the swamp and they might not be the people who live there or the people who want to live there. There are people who have opinions about the swamp, even though they're none of those other people. There are ecological activists, right? So there are people who regulate the swamp who never go there. There are all these different kinds of people who are surrounding this complex space. From the point of view of somebody who's a senior stakeholder on a project, I think one of the things that I've seen in big organizations is that the temptation and the kind of default behavior is to try and give the people who are trying to do projects in this space as little information as possible, and basically on a kind of need-to-know basis, possibly even forbidding people who are developing a project from talking to the people who are actually going to use it, or talking to the people who know how it should work. And I'm not saying that the people who are developing a project should be given carte blanche and access to everything. And obviously, this is very different in very different organizations, because they're swamps. They're all complex spaces. But it should be something to bear in mind if you're a senior stakeholder on a project, that by restricting access, for example, by restricting access to users who are finally going to use the system, or by restricting access to people who know how the system should work, you are potentially seriously damaging the chances of the project succeeding. And so that this might seem utterly mystifying to you, that people who are trying to do this project are saying, we need to talk to all these people, we need to know about all these things, that from your point of view, you're thinking, well, this is just a piece of software. Why do they need to know about these aspects of the business? Again, it all has to be a judgment call, but you should understand that there are potential downsides to restricting the access that people have to the organization and its complexity when they're trying to build some kind of project that fits in that space. Another one of the chapters where I talk about positive ways of looking at projects, I talk about the pirate ship, and I've talked about this a lot in various other places. What I've written here in the outline is as advice for senior stakeholders, which may sound like something very unintuitive. Look for trouble. What this means is that if your project is actually progressing and things are really happening, it will be experiencing problems, it will be experiencing difficulty, it will be upsetting somebody. If nothing's happening at all, then there won't be any indications of problems. So one of the dangers of in projects, and I talk about this when I in the chapter when I talk about streams, is that the people who are doing the project, they encounter resistance when they start to point out problems, and so they just shut up. They don't point out problems. They learn very quickly that pointing out difficulties and problems doesn't result in them getting an easy time, so they shut up. So if you're a senior stakeholder, one of the things that you should be looking for is indications of activity, and one of the aspects of activity that you should be looking for is that the project is encountering problems. That's one indication that it's kind of moving forward. And so one of the things I've written here in the outline is any messenger shooting behavior will be instantly received and understood. So when people who are working on a project experience problems and seek your help as a senior stakeholder, how you respond to that is extremely important. If your response to that is to tell them that they shouldn't be so negative, or if your response is to ignore them, or if your response is to put some kind of structure in place so that they can't talk to you again, those kinds of things, in my experience, project teams learn from that super fast. And the result of that will be that you don't hear any more about the problems that project's experiencing. But the result of you not hearing about the problems that the project's experiencing won't be that the project goes well. It will be that essentially that team has stopped trying to tackle the problems that are inside that project. So this next point that I've got around the pirate ship is quite a tricky one, and I'm wondering if I need to work on this in a different way. But I've written play unhappy families. The unhappy families thing comes from a Tolstoy quote from Anna Karenina, which is that all happy families are the same and all unhappy families are different. What you should realize is that your organization, this is again coming back to the swamp and the idea of complex environments, your organization is different and unique from other organizations in the ways that it's problematic and difficult. If you don't think it's problematic and difficult, I think that's probably a separate problem to discuss. But what you should understand is that if you're going to involve some of the methodologies that advocate working at scale, like SAFe or less or anything like that, these are only a starting point, and that for your organization, you do need to figure out how to tailor those kinds of approaches to your organization. What are the unique difficulties that your organization has? How can you change suggested ways of approaching, for example, scaling development, or even doing basic agile, so that it fits your organization? Where are we? 21. I'm going to just talk about the next two, and then I'm going to stop. So, advice for senior stakeholders. Might sound really strange, but these two kind of come together. One of the things that you should understand as a senior stakeholder who's connected with a project that's got funding and that is underway is that all projects that have got funding and are underway are bets. They are basically a wager that something will pay off despite risks that are attendant to it. And if that's the case, if you know that the project is a bet, then that should make you more tolerant of finding out that there are problems that need to be addressed, because this is not a certainty. If it was a certainty, it could have probably been done by buying software off the shelf or by writing a few commands on the command line. If it was an easy, straightforward thing, you wouldn't need a project. You wouldn't need to invest in a project to achieve it. The other thing that's really important to understand is that if this project is a big bet, you can lay off meaning make the bet smaller, make it into a series of small bets. And this is essentially what is being attempted by the idea of trying to get something working early, get some kind of small minimum viable product or some kind of small prototype working. That is a way of laying off the bet, of making the bet so it isn't such a monstrous one. It isn't just like pushing all of your chips into the center of the table at once, like you see in movies when people are playing poker. And the flip side of this idea that projects are bets is how, as a senior stakeholder, you should behave and react to the idea of commitment. Because if you go into the idea of projects as being about keeping promises, especially keeping promises for particular functionality, for a particular date, and for a particular cost, that is always, in my experience, the way that the purchasing people are going to see projects. But if, as somebody who is more closely involved with a project, you go into it in terms of that, you're going to miss all of the opportunities to de-risk the project, which come from building something small and connecting with users early on, but also de-risking the project by encountering difficulties and then changing what's going to be delivered and what's promised, and how much it's going to cost in light of what you find. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to bring Brian back. Brian, do you have any observations or comments on that?
Hi, Mark. I have been listening. I haven't done well with my soup, so I do really. I've got good things. Okay, shall I? Thank you for this. Lots and lots and lots to think about. Can I have a meta thing? Would you like me to say some things that you could react to for the purposes of videos and LinkedIn or something?
You can do.
Or do you want a private discussion, or do you want a bit of a mix or something?
I tell you what, for today, let's just say I'll stop the video here, and then you can just talk to me about what you've...
No, well, keep the video and use
Right
it as you wish.
Okay.
So,
right
because it could come up, and I'm very much... I'll turn to be a blank canvas in the background. Okay, then I'll try to say a sentence. You could chop it out and bring it in if you want to.
Okay.
So, thank you. Yeah, there's loads to think about there. So thank you very much for that. Let me go down. I'm just looking at you now, and actually, you're very you're
Yeah.
you need more light in your face.
Yeah.
So for future videos and things like that, do think about that.
Need some better lighting.
Because
Yeah.
it'll just get a ring light or something.
Yeah.
It'll bring it out, and we'll see you because I can barely see your face.
Thanks.
Okay, so I've marked off various things. With a bit of creativity, I'll go down them really.
Mhm.
Some of them are just notes. Right, so one idea, one reaction, I guess, is that you could have on a project good people trying to do a good job, but one of them is basically wants to think through the challenges, which might be conceptual challenges.
Yeah.
Another person might want to get to the data. Another one might want to understand the software or understand the process. And you can end up with kind of taking different bits of the elephant, being, it's the same overall project, but one gets the tail, one gets the trunk, and they're vying a certain amount for prominence and how you show progress on the whole project, and essentially not really working together, but all of them doing something that is reasonable to say it's a good thing. So so I'll just any comment.
Back to you, really. I mean, the thing that leapt to mind there is what in Agile is called product ownership. So basically, somebody has to decide between these priorities, and from the point of view of being a project manager, what I'd be pushing for, which might not, depending on the kind of product owner that you've got involved, might not be what their priority is I'd be pushing for something that would be able to get to the end of the process so that we could get feedback on it. But also the other things that I talked about in terms of importance of escape, it is like if you get something that flows through the end of whatever this thing is and whatever it does, you can get something that can get to the end and be consumed by somebody, then you can get feedback from the people who've consumed it at the end, but also you can get feedback on, is this technically viable? When we got near real people, and this is my experience of it, it sounds cartoonish, but it seems to be the way that it happens so often. Did some regulatory people appear and say, you're not allowed to do that unless you've filled in this form, or you have to show that you're compliant to the following things, etc. And one of my experiences is that it's always better to do that early so that you know what those things are rather than later. But put that strategy of putting together a small thing and getting it to the end, from my point of view, that would be something I'd be looking for a product owner to do, which is somebody who's prioritizing what the work is. If there is nobody there to do that, then I'd probably feel the role fell on me as a product owner, as a project manager, to say either there is no product owner, we need a product owner, or we need to appoint somebody as a temporary product owner. We need somebody to have that role.
So I'd like to pick up on roles. I guess that sometimes companies or government would be halfway between waterfall and agile.
Yeah.
And wouldn't really have grasped the concept of or the role of product owner.
Yeah.
And you'd have a project manager, and project managers vary. If I do a project manager, I'm quite technical, and there's good and bad about that. But you can have a project manager who says, I don't know the technical things, I don't know the subject matter, I'm managing the process, and that might be useful if there's a product owner.
Yeah.
And you can end up that there isn't really somebody who's overall saying, nobody to drive, this is the sliver, the small amount, to get something to the end.
Yeah.
And we build on that. So I think the roles and that side of things, and the whole clarity around project approach, agile, waterfall, etc. You need the right people in the right roles who are long enough in the job to be able to function in that.
It's very, very common, especially in my experience in government, that you struggle to find somebody to fit that role. And the main thing is, whatever people you have who are in that role, from the point of view of like, from my point of view, is to support them as much as possible. And also, like, truth be told, if I was managing a project, if there wasn't a strategy in place that involved early delivery of something, then I will be pushing for one. So for example, in a project that I did just recently, the guy who was the product owner hadn't been a product owner before. He was in many ways very, very capable, but pushing for something that we did, which was split up the product so that the front end, which was a form, could work independently of the back end where all the data was processed and gathered. I don't think you would have done that unless if I hadn't been around, basically. Maybe you would have done. But that was one of the things that we pushed for. Another thing that I pushed for was, well, when we get to this was extremely sensitive data. So it's like, well, when we get to a point where we can show this as a dummy without that sensitive data, we should do that. But also, when we get to a point where we can show people their sensitive data, even though what they do with it in this prototype isn't, it'll just be essentially read only. It looks like they can make changes, but those changes will just get wiped. That's another important step. So before we get to the point where we turn this on and say, okay, all the data's in this new system and it's live and anything you do has repercussions, if we can have steps before that where we can say, this is your data, do with it what you like, just to understand how the system works, and we're going to like roll it back, it won't make any difference. I think those kind of stages on that process, I would have said it's probably me who was instrumental in doing that, and very, very grateful and appreciative that the product owner supported that. And one of the results of that was that when we put old data in the new system and people looked at it, they just went, "What the hell is this?" Because it looked very different in the new system, and lots of kind of gremlins that were in the old system emerged, and there was a data cleaning job that kind of we found we needed to do that we didn't know about as a result of that. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Does a project need direction and prioritization and somebody who understands the importance of minimum viable products or minimum somethingable products? Yes, it does. It's a really important aspect of it.
Another thought I had is the idea of waiting for something, or waiting for the hero. Wait till we have data, wait till we have the software, wait till we have the new senior person, wait till the project manager's here, wait till the consultant or contractor, and then we'll be able to get stuck in and we'll kind of tinker around the edges first. And don't know, have you seen that happen?
Yeah, very often I've seen the two things together, like hurry up and wait together. So kind of like, we need to make progress on this project, but we can't make this decision until this person is in place or whatever. And I think this kind of in a way makes it even more important to try and get something all the way through and try and get some kind of demonstrator. Because if you can get some kind of demonstrator, then you will find out lots of information that if somebody comes along and makes a big decision that changes the strategy later on, you've still got information that helps. I think that's the kind of basically the idea that we should stop what we're doing completely because we're waiting for somebody to come or some new decision, etc. I think the question is, like, while we're waiting, what is a useful experiment that we can be doing? What is a useful small bet that we can be making while we're waiting for this big decision to happen? And also kind of the other thing is to make clear, this is the kind of aspect that I talk about in some of the other chapters about the project manager or the agile project manager, scrum master, whatever you want to call them, their job is to like televise the problems, is make it clear that this decision is preventing this thing from happening, and what the mitigation is in the light of that. So kind of, this is what we're doing while we're waiting for this other thing.
Okay, good. Another reaction I had is you mentioned essentially if you're getting your hands dirty, if you are getting the minimum viable product, you will be upsetting someone.
Yeah.
And that is essentially a sign of progress. There will be people whose strong, natural, and thoughtful reaction is definitely don't upset people.
Yeah.
So I think you've got quite a bit of contrast, and there's dangers of upsetting people, and maybe that is what you need to be able to do. So managing that in the context of upsetting, I think, interesting, takes particular consulting or people skills and probably technical skills to be getting there in the first place. If you've few technical skills, you may not want to go anywhere near the bit that would be upsetting people that you potentially should be getting into.
Yeah, I think this is the heart of the paradox. Is kind of what I've realised is, and this is something that now I kind of view with suspicion. Who is anybody who doesn't talk about that? Essentially, like trying to do something in a project is a paradoxical business, because if you actually start to do stuff, you upset the people who got the original funding and had the original idea. And doing that sufficiently gently that you don't get kicked out or stopped is the real challenge. Now, one of the things, and there is this kind of like awful spot in a project where you're trying to solve enough problems and do enough to generate something that can be connected to people who actually want it. But by doing that, you're upsetting the people who initially had the idea, or some other people inside the organization. It may be that some other people have just found out what you're trying to do and said, "I've heard you're doing this, don't." And that is a really tricky part of a project. But the options for not doing it aren't great either. So kind of what tends to happen with most projects is they just stop doing stuff and keep taking the money. So they do something that I talk about this in the chapter on the pirate ship. They do something called agreed activity, which is basically we're doing something that everybody is kind of agreed is work. It's not upsetting anybody. It's not really advancing the project very much. But we're not getting any grief for it, and we're getting paid. And that's where most projects that are not progressing end up. There are lots of other reasons why projects can end up in a situation where they're not progressing, but that's a really, really common one. And if you go in as a consultant and you say, you do some discussions, you say, well, what's going on here? Everybody knows what the problem is. Everybody knows what needs to be addressed very often in order to make the project go forward. They very often had some kind of conversation early on where they said, well, unless this issue gets addressed, we're not really going to make any progress. Somebody growled at them and said, why aren't you being positive? I expected you to be positive. I didn't know you were the kind of people who couldn't deal with these problems, etc. So they shut up. They just stopped saying it. And so the project, but they didn't leave. They carried on doing something that's kind of agreed. And that's a very, very dangerous place for a project to be in. As a senior stakeholder, this is like what I'm talking about here, is that as a senior stakeholder, you need to be very careful for that reason to avoid making noises that will essentially make people fall into this kind of agreed activity. And if you're a project manager, you need to be, to some degree, a continuous irritant. And, the more diplomatic you can be and the more gentle you can be about it, but kind of saying, well, look, until we get access to these people who really know how this system works, we're not really going to be making much progress. Or until we deal with the fact that this lovely new shiny technology doesn't do the thing you want it to do, we're not really going to make much progress, or whatever it is.
I got a sense of multiple things you have to balance of getting stuck in but not upsetting people, because if you get stuck in and upset people, you know, you make it you make it stopped. There are things I've heard of, topics you can't talk to or people you can't talk to, and then people get moved around. So a little bit of treading water could give it enough space for later on. A few things come together, and that for somebody who just wants to get on with it and solve problems could be very difficult. And if they don't want to get on and solve problems, then they're going to be treading water and not making progress. So you've all sorts of balances that some could be argued, might work for a while, and overall trying to get the people side right, the project side right, and the technical side right. They are the three main things I try and get right. Move them on, and there's all sorts of agreements and that's needed to get them right.
I think you're absolutely right, and I kind of, in what I was saying there, I didn't quite capture that. There's I was just reading something yesterday, some of the Cynefin stuff, where they were talking about I think they were talking about being comfortable with tension, and there's a book that I've read a repeated number of times. Well, actually, I've listened to as an audiobook a repeated number of times. Zen in the Art of Archery, where one of the things in that is remain comfortable in the state of highest tension. You don't want to say it's the highest tension, but kind of, I think this is the thing. It's like you unearth these problems. Like there's a problem with the technology. It's been decided by somebody else that this is the technology that's going to be used. You can't fix that overnight. You need to talk to the people who are actually on the front line making decisions using the old system, because they have very complex reasoning. These people cost £1,000 an hour to have in place. They're very difficult to get hold of. You can't fix that overnight. But you need, with all of these things, to come to some accommodation. And you need to be honest that these are issues that need addressing. And one of the things that I find is really interesting is that if you can kind of keep them essentially in the spotlight for long enough, you will get past the kind of go away and shut up and stop being negative. You'll get past the kind of, I thought you were professionals, I thought you'd be able to do this without talking to the people who can tell you how it works, all those kinds of reactions. And then you will essentially get to some kind of situation where they'll say, well, this guy, he's just retired as one of those people, would it be all right if you talk to him? Or, well, we're going to take this decision about this technology to the board and we're going to review it. So, and I think like one of the things I've been guilty of in the past is just impatience at that point. And,
well, even that as a impatience, the whole project, you need to get a sense of urgency. John Cotter comes up with a sense of urgency as one of the main things.
Yeah.
You need to have that. But if you push too far, people will be very uncomfortable. Gauging people's knowledge around things affects their level of confidence on things. And if you're too laid back, it affects them. Affects just getting that right. It has its own challenges. And you mentioned being comfortable with tension. I'm learning a language at the moment, and I'm good at kind of technical and analytical things. I'm not so good at languages, or I'm very, very slow on languages. But there is a sense of staying with this. It's a very slow process, but I have found a process that's working. And I think there's in a way, it's good for my level of patience to progress. Almost choosing a level of patience, a level of progress, a level of other things.
Of discomfort, yeah. I mean, with learning languages, and I think it's the same with projects. All of this stuff, but I think one of the things that I'm really kind of surprised by, and I think like in lots of other discussions that are around project management, talk about this. But when people talk about like various methodologies, I don't think I've ever seen anybody say, "Look, this is an inherently contradictory and difficult thing that you're doing here, because you have an idea and you're trying to do something to address the idea, but when you start to try and do that thing, you're going to undermine the idea and upset the people who had it. And I'm not sure I've seen that anywhere else related to project management. I think like there are similar things people talk about in terms of innovation, and probably other things as well. But with project management, I haven't seen that. Maybe that lots of people write about project management, so there's probably is something. But
yeah, I wonder if startups have that sort of idea. For me, I work on projects that are accounting. The end goal is theoretically fairly set, with some variability. But still, you've all the other issues around how you get there.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's what I have. So yeah, thank you very much. Those are really good ideas there, and I think a lot of them spark against each other.
Okay.
In a really good way.
Thank you very much, Brian. As always, nice to see you. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but I'm going to talk again tomorrow at 1:00. All right, Ian?
Are you? Okay, well, you're welcome to kind of give me a quick message, or I've got an idea to look out for you now.
Yeah.
And use the video any way you want to. Really.
Okay. So, that's marvellous.
Probably play with it a bit.
That's marvellous. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.
Okay.
Cheers, Mark.
Ta-ra for now.
Interesting talk. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.